"You can't come in here. This office is for executives only." The words landed like a slap against glass, sharp, loud, deliberate. It was 8:42 a.m. on a crisp New York morning, the kind where sunlight sliced through the high-rise windows like stage lights. In the lobby of Carter and Rowe Global Holdings, the marble floor gleamed, the polished steel turnstiles whispered authority, and yet one sentence had just ripped the air in half. A security guard, mid-40s, square jaw, cheap cologne, stood firm with his arm outstretched. His badge read D. Murphy, but his eyes spelled something else. Judgment. He didn't see a CEO, he saw an intruder. And the man in front of him, Elijah Carter, didn't flinch. Black jeans, plain navy blazer, no tie, no entourage. Just calm steps and a leather folder in hand. Nothing about him screamed power, except the way he stood. Grounded, immovable, as if the floor itself belonged to him. The guard leaned closer, lowering his voice but not his disdain. "You're not on the list. Staff entrances are in the back alley. Try there." Elijah stayed silent. He had heard this tone before years back, when he was 23, denied a seat at a loan officer's desk. Again at 31, mistaken for a delivery driver at his own groundbreaking ceremony. Now at 48, a billionaire, founder, majority shareholder, and face of an empire that spanned continents, here it was again. Same voice, same doubt, different uniform. Across the lobby, a young intern looked up from her laptop. Her eyes darted between Elijah and the guard. Her phone slipped into her palm almost by instinct, camera lens peeking above her bag. The silence stretched, thick and electric. Elijah didn't argue, didn't plead. He simply exhaled slow, measured, the kind of breath that comes before storms. The guard smirked, mistaking silence for weakness. "If you keep standing here, I'll call upstairs. They don't tolerate people loitering. Not in this building." But this wasn't just this building. This was his building. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change. And we're glad you're here. Now, back to Elijah. He shifted his weight, looked directly into Murphy's eyes, and finally spoke, voice low, calm, and razor sharp. "Call whoever you want. Just make sure you spell my name right." The guard blinked, confused. The intern's camera light glowed red. The story had just begun. Elijah Carter didn't move. He stood in front of the glass turnstiles like a man rooted into the earth, while the guard's hand hovered near his chest, blocking the way. Behind them, the lobby buzzed with the quiet rhythm of corporate mornings, heels clicking, phones buzzing, espresso machines hissing in the cafe corner. But here, at the center of polished marble and brushed steel, the air felt charged. The guard leaned in again, sharper this time. "I said you don't belong here. Step aside before I make a call." Elijah blinked once, slow, as if weighing every breath. Then he adjusted the leather folder in his hand and said nothing. Silence wasn't compliance, it was calculation. Across the lobby, the young intern with the phone pretended to scroll, but the red light of her camera told a different story. She whispered to the colleague beside her, "That's insane. He looks like he works here." The colleague shrugged. "Nah, probably a contractor. Or worse, trying to sneak in." The guard's radio crackled. A voice came through, sharp and impatient. "Lobby? Report." Murphy pressed the button. "Got a situation? Unknown male trying to breach executive floor access. Refusing to leave." "Copy. Manager inbound." Elijah's jaw tightened, but his stance remained calm. He had walked into this very building 2 decades earlier with nothing but an idea and a 5-page pitch deck. Back then, the receptionist didn't bother to look up before saying, "The internship program's downstairs." He remembered the sting in his chest, the humiliation of being unseen, unheard. And now, years later, after building an empire, acquiring companies, and steering billions in global assets, the echo of that same tone returned. This time, however, he wasn't 24. He was 48, and he owned every floor above this lobby. The elevator chimed. Out stepped a floor manager, crisply dressed, thin smile, practiced authority. She approached with clipped heels, her eyes sweeping Elijah up and down like a scanner. No tie, no visible badge, no aura of wealth. She stopped 3 feet away, folded her arms. "What's going on here?" Murphy gestured at Elijah. He's been standing here insisting on access. Won't present credentials. Won't move. Elijah raised his eyes, steady. I never said I wouldn't present credentials. He reached into his blazer, pulled out a black ID card with gold embossing, and extended it. The manager didn't take it. She smirked. Anyone can print a card. We've had fakes before. You're holding up real employees. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried across the lobby. Heads turned. A receptionist in the corner whispered, "They think he's a fraud." A ripple of stares moved through the room. The manager leaned closer. "You don't look like an executive. You look like someone making trouble. Security will escort you out unless you leave now." Elijah didn't move. He simply placed the ID on the scanner pad himself. The machine beeped once. Then the screen flashed red. A CSS denied. Gasps. Whispers. Even Murphy chuckled. "Told you." But Elijah didn't flinch. His gaze stayed level, calm as a still ocean. Inside his pocket, his phone buzzed a message from his assistant. "Protocol ready. Just say the word." He closed his fist over it, choosing patience. The storm wasn't here yet. Not quite. The manager tilted her head, relishing the moment. "See? No clearance. Whatever game you're playing, it ends here." Then she did something unnecessary, something theatrical. She plucked Elijah's ID from the scanner and tossed it into the nearest trash bin. A plastic thud echoed through the lobby, louder than it should have been. Phones rose higher. The intern's camera zoomed in. A receptionist covered her mouth. Elijah finally spoke, his voice low, deliberate. "You just threw away the wrong man's identity." The words didn't rise above conversation level, but the weight of them pressed against the glass walls. For a moment, even Murphy's smirk faltered. And then the lobby shifted. The manager lifted her chin, preparing to call upstairs, unaware she had just stepped into the very storm Elijah had been waiting for. The sound of the plastic ID card hitting the trash lingered longer than it should have, a hollow thud that echoed across the polished marble lobby. The manager's smirk widened, her arms crossing like she'd won some silent duel. But Elijah Carter remained perfectly still. His eyes traced the arc of his discarded ID, then returned to hers, calm and unyielding. He didn't bend. He didn't reach for the trash. That silence unsettled more than shouting ever could. From the cafe corner, a man in a charcoal suit muttered to his colleague, "They just threw out his badge? Isn't that illegal?" His companion shrugged, but pulled out a phone anyway. Murphy, the guard, puffed his chest. "Told you. Fake." The manager turned toward the reception desk. "Call additional security. We don't tolerate fraud in this building." Her words sliced through the air, deliberate, loud enough for half the lobby to hear. Eyes turned. Conversations hushed. Phones tilted higher. A quiet hum of whispers filled the space. Fraud. Scam. Doesn't belong here. Still, Elijah didn't move. He adjusted the folder in his hand, set it neatly on the counter beside him, and folded his arms not in defiance, but in patience. The manager misread it. "You're making this worse for yourself. People like you think confidence is a substitute for clearance." The phrase "people like you" rippled across the room. A receptionist's lips parted in shock. The intern filming shook her head, whispering under her breath, "She really said that?" Elijah closed his eyes briefly, steadying himself. He had heard that exact phrasing before. At 27, standing in line at a bank, the loan officer had leaned back and said, "People like you don't get approved for $500,000. At 34, during a hotel check-in, the concierge sneered, "People like you don't stay in penthouse suites." Now, in his own building, the words came again, same tone, same contempt, wrapped in different uniforms. The flash of memory didn't ignite rage. It sharpened resolve. Murphy stepped closer, now emboldened. "Last warning. Move along before we call NYPD. This isn't a shelter. It's an office." Phones lifted higher. Someone near the elevators muttered, "This is about to go viral." Elijah's hand hovered near his pocket, brushing the buzz of his phone again. His assistant's name glowed on the screen. "Protocol ready. Waiting." He didn't answer. "Not yet." The manager motioned to the reception desk. "Call them now." A young receptionist hesitated, her fingers trembling above the landline keypad. Her eyes flicked to Elijah, then to the growing circle of onlookers. "Are we sure?" she whispered. The manager snapped, "Do it." Elijah finally spoke, his voice calm but carrying. "You're about to regret every word that leaves your mouth." The manager chuckled, dismissive. "Threats now? Classic. The receptionist, still unsure, pressed the line. Security escalation to the lobby. Her voice cracked slightly. The entire sentence was logged into the system. The intern zoomed in, whispering to her phone, "He hasn't even raised his voice, and they're calling him a fraud." In the back corner, an older man in a Navy suit shook his head. "Ridiculous. You don't treat anyone like this." But the manager didn't hear or didn't care. She gestured sharply to Murphy. "Remove him." Murphy grabbed Elijah's arm. Gasps erupted. A woman near the glass doors covered her mouth. A man whispered, "That's assault." Elijah didn't resist. His feet planted like anchors, shoulders squared. He looked directly at Murphy, his voice still even. "You just put your hands on the one man in this building you can't afford to touch." Murphy froze for a beat, unsettled by the certainty in his tone. But the manager hissed, "Don't stop now. Finish it." And in that moment, the lobby felt less like a corporate entryway and more like a courtroom, every witness, every phone, every whisper becoming part of the record. Elijah let the silence hang for one more breath before tilting his head, almost a warning. His hand slipped fully into his pocket, thumb hovering over the phone screen. His eyes locked on the manager's. "You wanted proof," he said, voice still low but cutting through every whisper. "You're about to get more than you can handle." The manager scoffed, turning to Murphy. "Drag him out." But before Murphy could move again, the lobby doors hissed open. Another figure strode in a second guard, younger, holding a clipboard. His eyes landed on Elijah, then on the circle of phones raised like witnesses. He paused, confusion flashing across his face. The storm had begun. The younger guard froze halfway into the lobby, clipboard tucked under his arm, eyes darting between Murphy's grip and the cluster of raised phones, circling them like a jury. He opened his mouth, but the manager cut him off before he could speak. "This man is trespassing," she barked, her voice sharp enough to slice through the murmur of the crowd. "We're dealing with it." The words rang across the marble walls, heavy with performance. Heads turned. The receptionist at the desk winced, fingers tightening on the receiver. The intern filming mouthed to her camera, "She's making it worse." Murphy's hand still pressed against Elijah's arm, but the weight of it felt forced now, unsure. Elijah didn't resist. He stood like stone silent, composed, a mountain against a tide of noise. His calmness was unnerving. It wasn't the silence of fear. It was the silence of someone who had already decided how this would end. The manager's voice rose again, sharper, almost theatrical. "Security escalation confirmed. Unauthorized individual in the lobby fraud suspected." The announcement wasn't just for Murphy or the receptionist. It was for everyone within earshot. Phones lifted higher. A man in a gray trench coat whispered, "Fraud. He doesn't look like a scammer." His colleague muttered, "Doesn't matter. They're treating him like one." The intern shifted, her camera capturing every syllable. She whispered into her mic, "They're calling him a fraud without even checking his name." Elijah's eyes flicked toward her, steady, unshaken. He gave the faintest shake of his head, as if to say, "Don't post yet. Let them speak first." Murphy tugged harder on his arm. Elijah didn't move an inch. Instead, he turned his head slowly, his voice low but cutting. "Every word you've spoken is being logged. Make sure you can defend it." Murphy hesitated, his grip loosening. But the manager stepped closer, heels clicking like gavels. "Don't listen to him. He's bluffing. People like this." She stopped herself, but too late. The phrase had already poisoned the air. A woman near the cafe counter gasped. She said, "People like this." The crowd's murmur grew louder, restless, a tide turning. Elijah didn't flinch. He inhaled once, steady, like someone drawing from a well of memory. He remembered another lobby, Atlanta, 24 years old, fresh off a red-eye flight. He'd walked into a hotel with a confirmed reservation, and the clerk didn't even look at his ID before saying, "This isn't the place for you." He slept in his car that night, drafting notes that would later become the foundation of his empire. Now, standing in a lobby he owned, the echo returned. Same dismissal, same contempt. But this time, he wasn't the one about to leave. Murphy glanced at the crowd, nerves showing. "Boss, maybe we should double-check," the manager snapped. "No, he's wasting everyone's time. Get him out." The receptionist at the desk finally spoke, her voice trembling. "Shouldn't we verify his name first?" The manager rounded on her. "Do you want your job? Then follow orders." Elijah turned his head toward the young woman, eyes steady, voice calm. "Speak the truth. Let them hear it." Okay. Her lips parted, but she faltered under the weight of her manager's glare. Still, the hesitation was enough. Someone else stepped forward, a middle-aged man in a navy suit, briefcase still in hand. His voice was quiet but firm. "I've seen his face before. Isn't that Elijah Carter?" The murmur swelled. Phones tilted higher. The manager stiffened. "That's not him," she snapped too quickly. "Don't be fooled." But the name was out there now. Elijah Carter. It rolled across the lobby like a spark searching for kindling. The intern whispered into her camera. "Wait, Elijah Carter? The founder?" Elijah still didn't claim it. He let the silence hang, his presence filling the space more than words ever could. The manager's composure cracked for a split second, then hardened again. "Enough of this charade. Call the police. Now." The receptionist's hand hovered over the keypad, trembling. The intern zoomed in. The crowd leaned forward. And Elijah, still anchored, still silent, simply folded his arms across his chest, as if to say, "Go ahead. Make your move. I'll be here when the storm breaks." The lobby wasn't quiet anymore. It was humming, alive, like the moment before lightning splits the sky. The receptionist's hand hovered above the keypad, trembling, torn between the command of her manager and the weight of what she was witnessing. The silence stretched, heavy, until the manager barked again, louder this time. "Call them. This man is trespassing. He's here under false pretenses." The word false hit the marble like a hammer. Phones lifted higher. A woman in a red coat near the revolving doors shook her head. "How can she say that? He hasn't done anything." Murphy doubled down, his grip tightening once more. "Boss, maybe we should frisk him. He could be carrying something." Gasps rippled. Someone muttered, "That's harassment." Another voice whispered, "This doesn't feel right." Elijah's face didn't change. Calm, anchored. He looked Murphy in the eye, his voice even. "Touch me again, and you'll answer for it. Not here, not today, but you will answer." Murphy hesitated. His hand faltered, but the manager's glare pressed him forward. "Do it," she snapped. "He doesn't belong." Elijah exhaled slowly, his silence louder than any protest. He had learned long ago that silence unsettled more than shouting. It let the guilty fill the space with their own noise. And fill it they did. The manager stepped closer, her voice carrying across the lobby. "This is a fraud attempt. He's trying to impersonate someone. Look at the way he's dressed. Look at the way he carries himself. Real executives don't walk in here like this." The words were deliberate, crafted to turn the crowd. A young analyst near the cafe shook his head. "Executives come in all shapes. She's wrong." His voice didn't carry far, but it added to the murmur of discontent. Then the insult came sharper. Murphy yanked the leather folder from Elijah's hand and snapped it open. Papers fluttered out onto the polished floorboard: reports, acquisition drafts, confidential files. The sound of pages scattering was loud enough to hush the room. Murphy smirked, waving one page like a trophy. "These don't look like they belong to you. What are you, stealing corporate documents now?" The lobby gasped. A woman near the windows clutched her handbag tighter. A man whispered, "This is absurd. That's a crime in itself, grabbing his property like that." Elijah didn't bend to pick up the pages. He stood straighter, his eyes fixed on Murphy. "You just made your last mistake." But the manager wasn't done. She crouched, snatched a document from the floor, glanced at the header, and scoffed. "Financial projections? Executive minutes? This is stolen material. You're impersonating an officer of this company." She looked around, voice louder, tone dripping with authority. "Everyone, this man is a thief." The word landed like shrapnel. Thief. The intern filming gasped audibly. Did she just call him a thief? Her phone tilted higher, capturing every detail. The papers scattered across marble, Murphy's grip still hovering near Elijah's arm, the manager holding the document like evidence in a courtroom. A murmur swept through the lobby. "A thief?" one man whispered. "He doesn't look like one." Another voice cut sharper. "Doesn't matter what he looks like. They've already decided." Elijah's silence deepened. He didn't bend, didn't plead. He let the word echo. He let them dig deeper. Finally, he spoke, his tone sharp but calm. "You've accused me of fraud. You've accused me of theft. In front of witnesses. In front of cameras. Do you realize what you've just done?" The manager scoffed. "We're protecting this company. You're nothing but a con artist trying to walk into a boardroom you don't belong in." But the name Elijah Carter still hovered in the air from part 4, whispered now in pockets of the crowd. Some were connecting dots, some weren't sure, but the doubt in the manager's voice was starting to fray. Murphy shoved the folder against Elijah's chest, papers crumpling between them. "Pick up your trash and get out, before I put cuffs on you." Phones rose higher. The crowd wasn't whispering anymore. They were murmuring loud enough for tension to break. He hasn't raised his voice once. This feels wrong. They're going too far. And in the center of it all, Elijah Carter stood anchored, hands free, eyes steady, silence like steel. He didn't need to raise his voice. He knew the storm was about to turn. The word thief still hung in the air, vibrating against the glass walls of the lobby. It wasn't just an accusation, it was a brand, burned into the silence for every witness to hear. Murphy shoved the crumpled folder harder against Elijah's chest, his voice rising. "You heard her. You don't belong here. You're done." Elijah didn't move. His arms stayed at his sides, his eyes steady. Calmness had a weight, and right now it pressed heavier than Murphy's grip. But the manager wasn't satisfied. She held the scattered page aloft, waving it like proof. "We've seen this before. People like him sneak in, grab what they can, and vanish. Not this time. We caught you in the act. People like him." The phrase landed sharper this time. No pretense, no mask. A murmur ran through the lobby. The man in the trench coat from earlier shook his head. "That's profiling. Plain and simple." A woman clutching her handbag whispered, "I can't believe she just said that out loud." The intern filming turned her phone toward herself, whispering into the camera, "She said it again. People like him. Everyone heard it. This is being recorded." Murphy tightened his grip on Elijah's arm, tugging toward the revolving doors. "Let's end this." But Elijah didn't move, his feet planted firm like roots sunk into the marble. He turned his head slowly, eyes locking on Murphy's. His voice was low, controlled, but every syllable carried weight. "Take your hand off me. That's your last chance." Murphy smirked, trying to mask his hesitation. "Or what? You'll call the cops on me?" The manager sneered. "Don't waste words on him. Call the police. Tell them we have a hostile intruder." The receptionist froze, phone still in hand. Her voice trembled. "Ma'am, I'm not sure." "Do it!" the manager snapped, her tone cracking like a whip. And then, for the first time, the receptionist didn't obey. She lowered the receiver, her lips pressed tight, her eyes flicked to Elijah, then to the circle of witnesses, then back to her manager. "I won't. This doesn't feel right." A ripple spread through the lobby. Small, but loud enough. The manager's eyes blazed. "Then you're finished here. Hand over your badge." Gasps. The crowd stirred. The intern whispered into her phone. She just threatened to fire her for refusing to call the cops on a man who hasn't done anything. The receptionist's voice shook, but she held her ground. "I won't lie. Not for you." The silence that followed was heavier than shouting. Phones tilted higher. A man near the elevator muttered, "She's the only one with backbone here." Elijah remained still, eyes calm, chest rising steady. He didn't thank her, didn't nod. He didn't need to. Her words had already shifted the air. The manager's control cracked. She turned back to Elijah, her voice harsher, louder, desperate to regain ground. "You're a fraud, a thief. You're dangerous, and if you don't walk out right now, we'll make you." "Oh." The words were designed for the crowd, meant to paint Elijah as a threat, but the attempt backfired. The older man in the Navy suit stepped forward, voice steady. "Dangerous? He hasn't moved. He hasn't raised his voice. You're the ones escalating." The murmur grew louder. "She's lying. This is wrong. He's not dangerous. Look at him." Murphy shifted uncomfortably. For the first time, doubt flickered across his face. He looked around, noticing the ring of witnesses, the glowing cameras, the voices rising against them. His grip loosened, but the manager doubled down, her words spitting venom. "If you people want to defend a con artist, that's on you. But I won't have him in this building another second." She jabbed a finger toward Elijah, her voice cutting the air. "Get out, now." Elijah didn't move. His silence was deliberate, commanding, more powerful than any outburst. His eyes scanned the room, not in plea, not in fear, but in quiet authority. The crowd saw it. The intern whispered to her live stream, "He's not budging. And honestly, he doesn't look scared. He looks like he's waiting for something." And he was, because in Elijah Carter's pocket, his phone still buzzed, his assistant's message glowing, "System armed, one word, and everything changes." But not yet. For now, he let the insults pile higher, the witnesses grow louder, the cameras keep rolling, because the storm hadn't peaked. Not until the truth came crashing down. And when it did, it would end more than just this confrontation. It would end careers. The manager's words still echoed, "Get out. Now." But Elijah Carter didn't move. The silence that followed was louder than any protest. Phones hovered higher, recording every second. The crowd wasn't just watching anymore, they were bearing witness. Murphy shifted, uncomfortable, but the manager doubled down. "Fine. If you won't walk out, you'll be carried out." She snapped her fingers. The younger guard with the clipboard, still standing uncertainly near the doorway, looked startled. "Ma'am, do it," she barked. "Remove him. This is a secure building." Murphy didn't hesitate this time. He grabbed Elijah's arm with both hands, jerking hard toward the revolving doors. Elijah's body didn't sway. He stood like anchored steel, his feet refusing to yield even an inch. The movement looked more like Murphy straining against a statue than a man. Gasps erupted across the lobby. The woman in the red coat shouted, "That's assault." The intern filming whispered into her camera, "He hasn't even moved, look at them dragging him." The manager's voice rose louder, like she was performing for the witnesses. "This is what happens when you try to sneak in where you don't belong." The words cracked through the lobby, aimed to humiliate, to brand him in front of strangers. Murphy tugged harder, the strain visible in his shoulders, but Elijah's stance didn't break. Instead, Elijah turned his head slowly, his voice cutting through the chaos like glass on marble. "Every second of this is being recorded. Every word. Every hand laid on me." Murphy froze. The crowd murmured louder, but the manager pressed on, desperate, voice trembling with the weight of her own false authority. "You think your little threats matter? You're nothing here. Nothing. A fraud who thought he could play executive." Her hand darted toward the trash bin, snatching his discarded ID again. She held it high like a badge of shame. "Here's the proof fake credentials. This man is a liar." She tossed it onto the floor, letting it slide across the marble toward the doors. The action was meant to end him, to make him small. Instead, it made the lobby erupt. "That's not how you treat someone. This is disgusting. Unbelievable." The older man in the Navy suit stepped forward, voice raised this time. "Enough. I know who this is. You're making a mistake you'll regret." The manager turned on him, venom sharp. "Step back, unless you want to be escorted out too." But the damage was done. The whisper of Elijah's name Carter spread again, bouncing from phone to phone, voice to voice. Not everyone recognized it yet, but enough people were starting to connect the dots. Murphy shoved Elijah once more, trying to force him toward the doors. Elijah's blazer shifted, revealing the edge of his phone. The screen still glowed with a single unread message. "Protocol armed." One word. He didn't speak it yet. Instead, Elijah let Murphy push, let the humiliation peak, let the cameras catch every second. His silence wasn't weakness. It was strategy. The intern zoomed in tight on his face. Her voice trembled as she whispered to her stream, "Look at him. He's not begging. He's not afraid. He's just waiting." And she was right. Because Elijah Carter knew the higher they built this mountain of humiliation, the harder it would collapse when the truth came down. The storm hadn't broken yet, but the air was already electric. Murphy's shove rattled through the lobby, but Elijah Carter didn't stumble. His shoes held the marble like anchors, his posture unbroken. The manager's voice rose again, desperate and loud enough for every camera lens. "You see, he resists because he knows he doesn't belong. He's a danger to this building." The accusation hung like smoke, choking the air. Some gasped, others shook their heads. A ripple of disbelief spread through the witnesses, but the manager pressed on. She wanted spectacle. She wanted humiliation. Elijah finally moved, but not the way they expected. He reached calmly into his blazer and pulled out his phone. The crowd leaned in. The intern's camera zoomed so tight, the glow of the screen reflected in her eyes. Elijah pressed one button, "Protocol. Log everything from this moment forward," he said, his voice low, steady, and certain. On the other end, a crisp female voice answered, audible enough to be caught by nearby microphones. "Logged. Timestamp confirmed. Full audit initiated." The crowd stirred. Phones rose higher. The manager faltered. "Who are you talking to?" Elijah's eyes never left hers. My office. The words landed like a crack of thunder. Murphy sneered, trying to regain control. Nice trick, talking to yourself on speaker. But then the voice returned, louder, undeniable. Mr. Carter, security feeds are now archived. Witness recordings synced. Do you want me to escalate? Gasps rolled through the lobby. The older man in the navy suit muttered, Carter? Did she just say Carter? The manager's face stiffened. Coincidence. Don't fall for it. But the receptionist whispered, just loud enough for the nearest guests to hear, No, I saw his name in the system this morning. Carter, penthouse level. Phones captured everything. Elijah didn't move, didn't gloat. He simply slid his phone back into his blazer, voice calm as stone. Proceed with the audit. The assistant's voice was sharp, clinical. Understood. Beginning lock sequence. Awaiting your final word. The crowd wasn't whispering anymore. They were buzzing, a current moving through the lobby like the build of a storm. And Elijah? He stood taller now, the calmest man in the room, his silence no longer mistaken for weakness. The storm had turned. The lobby buzzed like a hive, every phone raised, every whisper carrying the same word. Carter. The manager tried to shout over it, her voice cracking. Don't believe this stunt. He's faking. But before she could finish, a voice boomed from Elijah's phone, piped through the speaker for everyone to hear. Crisp, official, undeniable. Attention. Elijah Carter, founder and majority shareholder of Carter & Rowe Global Holdings, is now on site. All systems recognize his authority, confirming he outranks every executive in this building. The words didn't just echo, they detonated. Gasps erupted. The receptionist dropped her handset. The intern's hand shook so hard her camera wobbled. The older man in the navy suit whispered, I knew it. Murphy froze mid-grip, his hand slipping off Elijah's arm as if burned. His eyes darted between the phone and the growing sea of witnesses. The manager's face drained of color. That's impossible, she whispered, but her voice lacked conviction. Elijah finally stepped forward, closing the distance between himself and the woman who had called him a thief. His eyes were steady, voice low but sharp enough to cut the room in half. You called me a fraud in the office I built. You threw away my name like it meant nothing. You tried to erase me. The manager stammered, words tripping over each other. I didn't know. Elijah didn't blink. That's the problem. You never even asked. You judged first, decided second. And now you answer for it. Phones captured every syllable. The crowd was no longer neutral. They were leaning in, some nodding, some whispering, all waiting for the next move. And Elijah Carter, the man they had tried to drag from his own building, finally let the silence fall in his favor. The storm had broken. The room tilted. It wasn't the marble floors or the glass walls, it was the balance of power. In a single sentence, everything had flipped. Murphy stepped back, palms lifting like he'd touched fire. Sir, I didn't know. His voice cracked, the bravado gone. The manager's composure shattered. She tried to muster authority, but her words tangled. This can't. Her eyes darted to the receptionist, to the phones, to the crowd recording her every flinch. He didn't say who he was. How was I supposed to? But excuses couldn't patch the silence pressing in from every corner. Witnesses shook their heads, whispering, You didn't even check. You called him a thief. This is going online. The receptionist, trembling but steady, said softly, I told you. I saw his name in the system this morning. The manager's face went pale. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. Elijah Carter didn't move quickly. He didn't need to. His calm presence filled the space more than shouting ever could. He glanced once at Murphy, then at the manager, then at the cluster of phones capturing their unraveling. You built this moment yourselves, he said evenly. All I had to do was stand still. The crowd murmured louder, a tide turning against the staff. The intern whispered to her live stream, They're finished. Everyone knows it. Murphy's shoulders sagged. The manager clutched the discarded ID card in her trembling hand, but it no longer looked like evidence. It looked like proof of her own blindness. And Elijah? He stood tall, silent, letting the weight of truth crush them without lifting a finger. The lobby was silent except for the hum of phones recording. The staff who once barked orders now stood trembling in the light of their own mistakes. Elijah Carter drew his phone from his blazer once more. One tap, and his assistant's voice filled the air. Mr. Carter, system standing by. Your orders? Every witness leaned in, breath caught. The manager whispered, "Please don't." Her words crumbled into the marble floor. Elijah's gaze cut through her, calm, precise, irreversible. "Terminate access for Gregory Murphy, head of security. Terminate access for Dana Whitfield, floor manager. Effective immediately." There was no shout, no flourish, just command. "Confirmed," his assistant replied. A beat later, both Murphy's and Dana's badges buzzed red in their holders. Access denied, systems locked, in front of everyone. Murphy stared down at his badge, color draining from his face. "Sir, I didn't mean—" Elijah didn't let him finish. His voice was low but carried like a gavel. "You judged me by what I looked like. You called me a fraud in my own house. Now you'll explain to your families why you no longer work here." The crowd erupted gasps, murmurs, a woman whispering, "Justice, real justice." Dana's knees buckled slightly, the ID card slipping from her hand onto the floor with a hollow clink. She looked around desperately, but no one came to her defense. Elijah slipped his phone back into his blazer. His final words were measured, sharp as glass. "You're not leaving this building because you escorted me out. You're leaving because I just escorted you out of your future." The red buzz of the terminated badges still glowed as silence wrapped the lobby. The crowd of witnesses, phones raised, eyes wide, wasn't just watching anymore. They were judging too, and the verdict was unanimous. Murphy's hands trembled. Dana's face had gone pale. Neither dared move. They stood stripped, not by force, but by truth. Elijah Carter turned his back to them, each step deliberate, unhurried, toward the executive elevators. The parted crowd moved instinctively, making space as if the floor itself was bowing. The intern whispered to her live stream, voice trembling, "This is history. They tried to erase him, and now look." At the elevator, Elijah paused. He turned, scanning the room once more, every guard, every clerk, every witness clutching their phones like evidence of justice delivered. His voice carried low, calm, unshakable. "You mistook silence for submission. That was your last mistake." The line landed like a verdict. Phones caught it. Gasps echoed. The crowd knew it wasn't just for the two stripped of their badges, it was for every person who had ever been underestimated in a place they belonged. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime. Elijah stepped inside without looking back. And as the doors closed, his final words lingered in the lobby, heavy, undeniable. "I don't need to prove I belong here. I built here, and no one erases the architect of the house." The doors sealed shut, and in the silence that followed, the applause began.